Mr. Superintendent, I'd like to ask you to provide your grading committee recommendations presentation and then the capstone program presentation.
Thank you, President Baker, members of the board. I'd like to turn this over to our Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Darrell Sanders, and the team he convened to prepare this recommendation for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Good. Good evening.
Good evening.
President Baker, members of the board, Madam Treasurer, Madam Internal Auditor, and Superintendent Good. Tonight we have two presentations. First, our presentation is on our academic grading procedures, middle and high school. These are our final report of recommendations. It'll be led by Susie Rett, who is now our interim Executive Director of Human Resources, but she used to be in our shop. Our academic shop is our Curriculum Leadership Development Director, so we're very happy to have her lead this with her team. Thank you, Susie.
Good evening, President Baker, members of the board, Madam Treasurer, Madam Internal Auditor, and Dr. Good. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you this evening to share highlights of the recommendations of the Joint Committee on Academic Grading Procedures for Middle and High Schools. This evening's presentation will focus on the final report of recommendations prepared for Superintendent Dr. Dan Good and Chief Academic Officer Darrell Sanders. The recommendations being presented to you this evening are the work of a joint committee with administrative and teacher representation. With us this evening, members of the committee are Kevin Jackson, teacher of Champion Middle School, Donna LeBeau, principal of Hiltonia Middle School, Jay Sanchez, teacher, Northland High School, Dr. Todd Walker, principal of Walnut Ridge High School, Susie Wright, who is not with us this evening, also teacher of Walnut Ridge, and myself, Susie Rett, serving as the curriculum director for middle school and high school divisions. During the fall of 2013-2014 academic year, the Columbus City Schools Senior Administration, in collaboration with the Columbus Education Association, established a joint committee of educators to develop recommendations for middle school and high school grading procedures. The purpose and charge of this committee was to develop a district standard for grading at the middle and high school levels, including quarterly grades reflecting students' academic progress, repeat and repeatable courses, and final grade determination. The committee's work focused on the current grading practices and procedures within Columbus City Schools and research of other local, state, and national districts' grading procedures and policies, including districts across Central Ohio, the Ohio Urban School Districts, and the Council of Great City School Districts. Pages 3 and 4 of your report indicate the specific school districts for which the committee researched for the recommendations. At this time, Dr. Todd Walker will discuss the committee's philosophy and an overview of the recommendations with respect to determination of grades.
Thank you, Ms. Rett. The committee's philosophy was that Columbus City Schools students will achieve academic mastery as defined by local, state, and national standards. Indicators of student mastery include the ability to teach what they know, use content language, think critically, and create new meaning. Students will have the opportunity and many opportunities to internalize and demonstrate their understanding of newly acquired information, skills, and processes that are tied to rigorous academic standards, and that grades will accurately reflect students' learning and mastery in a course. To measure students' learning and mastery, teachers shall determine grades using a variety of ongoing, developmentally appropriate methods to measure student progress, such as classroom engagement, homework, classwork, and labs, quizzes, projects, research papers, performance assessments, rubrics, and tests. Grades should be based on the individual student's mastery of standards, as defined by Common Core standards and Ohio Learning Standards. Grades should not be determined by a bell curve. Academic grades should not be lowered as a result of unsatisfactory conduct, except in cases of cheating, nor should they be increased on the basis of behavior. The committee spent much time researching and deliberating on the type of grading scale to use to reflect students' grades and grade point averages for their grade cards and official high school transcripts. The committee is recommending that the district transition from the traditional 4-point scale, where an A is 4 points, B is 3 points, and so forth, to a plus-minus scale that more accurately depicts the student's course performance. On the screen, you will see the recommended grading scale for 9-week quarter grades as well as final course grades. This scale is also depicted on page 6 of your report. Jay Sanchez will now share the committee's focus and recommendations for consistency of course scheduling with respect to course additions and drops on student schedules, as well as when students find themselves needing to withdraw from the school district, transferring into the district, and students who may need to request grades of incomplete.
So we were looking at more than just a grading scale, but a policy in general would deal with some of the ins and outs of how grades are established and transfers and those kinds of things. So while the district has done a good job communicating timelines and deadlines for course drops and adds to students' schedule over the years, the committee wanted to formalize that practice and make it part of our recommendations today. For course additions, high school and middle school students may be enrolled in a year-long course for high school credit up through the third Friday of the first grading period. High school and middle school students may be enrolled in a semester course for high school credit up until the second Friday for the semester of the course. For drops, high school and middle school students enrolled in a semester course for high school credit may drop the course by the end of the 5th week of the first grading period of the semester without penalty of grade. High school and middle school students may drop a year-long course by the end of the 8th week of the first grading period of the course without penalty of grade. If the course is dropped after the established timeline, a final grade of F will be entered on the student's transcript and will calculate as a 0.0 in the student's overall high school grade point average. Dropping a course should be a rare occurrence. The administrator, teacher, student, and parent must be included in discussion and decisions regarding dropping a course. For student withdrawals, with respect to students withdrawing from a district school, they'll be given the letter grade they have earned in each course up to the date of the withdrawal to report to their new school. Course credit will not be granted unless the course has been completed prior to withdrawing from a district school. Transfers. Students transferring from another school system or private school will be given the quarter semester grade the sending school indicates. The student's final grade will be determined by combining the transfer grades and the grades earned in the district school. All transfer credits and final grades will be reported on the student's record and transcript according to the scale and GPA calculations of the transfer district. For incomplete coursework, at the conclusion of a grading period, with the approval of the principal, teachers may give students who are absent for extended periods of time due to documented medical reasons a grade of incomplete. The student will be given the opportunity to make up the work and have the incomplete grade changed to a standard grade. The amount of time given to the student to make up the work will equal the number of days the student has been absent from the class. Any work not made up will be recorded as failing, and the final grade will be calculated accordingly. Then we had some questions around repeat courses and some kind of test preparation courses that might be offered. So we looked into that, and the district has established practice with regards to repeat courses. The committee has formalized this practice as part of its recommendations tonight. Specifically, when a student repeats a high school credit-bearing course, the higher of the two grades will be used to compute the student's GPA. However, both grades will remain on the student's transcript, which is the official document of the student's high school coursework. Assignment of letter grades A through F for test preparation coursework is difficult, as students may demonstrate progress toward mastery, but not mastery in and of itself. Therefore, students engaged in test prep coursework for Ohio's assessments or college test preparation will be graded using a pass-fail grading scale. Students must complete 60% of the coursework and demonstrate progress for a grade of P. A pass-fail course will have no impact on a student's grade point average each 9 weeks, nor on their official high school transcript. Dr. Walker will now discuss the committee's recommendations with regards to supports for graduating seniors and the identification of valedictorians and salutatorians.
So this next session pertains to the notifications for graduating seniors to their parents and to the students, and then to the selection and identification of valedictorians and salutatorians. The committee is recommending that each high school principal or their designee make reasonable efforts to establish personal contact with parents and guardians of seniors whose performance indicates that students may not be eligible to graduate at the end of the second semester of their senior year. This notification must be made no later than the end of the senior's 7th semester of their high school career. Written documentation of parent-guardian notification shall be maintained by the high school. With respect to the senior class valedictorians and salutatorians, the committee recommends that the district's high schools maintain autonomy for their determination. The factors for determining class valedictorians and salutatorians must be published in each high school's student handbook at the time the students enter their freshman year. Next steps. The committee's next steps will include working collaboratively with our Columbus Education Association colleagues, school leadership development, parent and family engagement, student support services, and the district's communications department to develop and institute a communications plan to share this information with principals, teachers, students, and parents. President Baker, members of the board, Madam Treasurer, Madam Internal Auditor, and Dr. Good, this concludes our presentation. We thank you for this opportunity to share the committee's recommendations with you this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions from board members on this presentation? Board Member Hudson.
Thank you. President Baker, is this close enough? Thank you. My question, thank you very much. First, thank you all for your service on this panel, or on this effort. It looks like it was very comprehensive. My question is, how do these recommendations compare to prior practices? And where have we, I think it would be probably beneficial in that communication plan to indicate where best practices have been lifted up and improved upon but if you could maybe provide us with some examples or a summary, that would be terrific. Thank you.
President Baker, Ms. Hudson, members of the board, as our colleagues shared this evening, some of these practices were in the administrative handbook that is distributed each year via electronic process. For instance, the repeat policy with regards to students' grades always remaining on the transcript because it is an official document. Some of the major changes presented this evening is with regards to a plus and minus grading scale, the A+, A-, B+ scale. We felt that that would more accurately depict the students' progress with regards to their course performance rather than the formal A- or A, B, C, D scale. With regards to formalizing the class valedictorian and salutatorian, a number of years ago there was a district committee that was put together and formulated to talk about what those recommendations should be. At that point in time, it was decided that each school would have the autonomy to select their process and procedures for valedictorians. This committee looked at that work again, looked at research across the country, and wanted to maintain that best practice. But again, making sure that that information is always shared in the student handbook at the beginning of the student's freshman year. We have many students that begin their freshman year and they monitor each other's GPA through those 4 years. But we felt that that autonomy should, again, still belong at the schools. So that's some of the highlights, Ms. Hudson. I think that we wanted to take a look at past practice, making things more formal with regards to these recommendations, and then a means to communicate and making sure that it's formally in print so that all of our stakeholders knew what the committee's recommendations were, and ultimately Chief Academic Officer Daryl Sanders and Dr. Good's recommendations.
Very good, thank you.
Other questions from board members? Yes, Ms. Gibbs.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate the thought and the review and the work that has gone into here. Just a few questions. First, on the notification to graduating seniors, I think you wrote that we will make contact after their 7th semester. Why so late? So if they're not going to graduate, telling me in January is a bit late for me as a parent. Can you tell me why the 2nd semester was chosen as opposed to the 1st semester? And then can you tell me what communication or where does the guidance counselor fall in that conversation in terms of other options that they would be given?
Take the first half. President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, members of the board, with regards to the student's high school career, there is a graduation planner that's monitored with the students and parents through the guidance counselors each of their 4 years of high school. And so as they enter their 4th year of high school or their senior year, they are monitoring and tracking everything that they need in order to graduate with regards to credits. This committee was really looking at during the student's senior year, having all the courses that they need in order to graduate a part of their schedule, but really taking a look at that semester point. 7th semester is midway through their senior year, looking at the grades and the courses that they're currently taking a look at each of those 2 9-week grading period grades for each course to determine that. That was more at a school-based level rather than a teacher and a guidance counselor level. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Walker. As a practicing high school principal, he can talk a little bit more about the formal process that he uses. But again, in no means did we mean that a student wouldn't know throughout their high school career what were the credits they needed for graduation. Thank you.
Right, and I think that that's something that happens along the way with the graduation planner. Part of the work of the committee was trying to formalize an expectation around what all high schools would do. And so that after that first semester that there would be a formal notification to let students know that this is where we are. I know at my particular school that communication begins at the beginning of the year where we start having conversations with students as early as August and September when we have our initial senior meetings. And that comes, Ms. Gillison has been really good about reiterating that to us. But in the way of policy, there's not been anything that's been established. And so I think it is important, particularly when you transition into January and students and those seniors in particular begin thinking about senior activities and in particular graduation and prom, most significantly graduation, that there is a formal process that we use to say, this is where you are, this is what needs to happen. If it does not happen, then graduation is not a realistic expectation at this point. But we also try to articulate in that what their pathway would be for summer graduation and some alternatives even beyond that if they're significantly credit deficient.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. You talk about giving an I with the approval of the principal for students who are absent due to medical reasons. Is that a hard and fast, just medical doctor's note? Or would that, how do you keep that standardized so that that is what is required across the board for each building?
President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, what we would take a look at is Board Policy 5131.3, which reflects our attendance policy, and it spells out very succinctly what is excused absences with that medical documentation or death of the family member. Those would be the policies that we would use. Again, it's already embedded in your attendance policy.
Okay, this is medical, this doesn't say anything about death.
Thank you.
So if I would just suggest
Thank you.
you spell out every single instance that you can receive an I. Because reading it right here, it just says medical, but if someone at one building says, well, her mother died, I mean, how would that look from a consistency standpoint for somebody who got the mumps? So
Thank you very
when
much.
when you give it to us, can you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is the exact required documentation by a licensed doctor, not an herbalist or nobody, I mean, it has to be somebody with an office, I mean, be very specific, because we don't want any wiggle room, because the first person that finds some type of gray area, the whole thing turns gray, and I think it should be as clear as black and white as to what constitutes an I as opposed to a F, because I think the rest of it is very clear.
Ms. Gibbs, we literally will pull the language straight from your policy, and there are 7 different bullet points that address those factors, so we will pull that straight from your policy.
That'd be awesome. I have 2 more questions. I would yield to my colleagues if anyone has any additional.
Would anyone else like to get a question in while they can? Ms. Gibbs, please.
Sure. On this grading scale, I have another question about the grading scale. Very aggressive, it will be a bit of a change for the district. Is there, you offered autonomy to buildings to determine their valedictorian and salutatorian status. Do buildings have autonomy to establish their honor roll level? Because this is going to become deep at the middle school. Is honor roll at this school a 92 or an A plus or A minus? Or is honor roll, A plus only? What is the autonomy, or how will buildings establish what their honor roll and achievement levels are?
President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, members of the board, I believe at this point in time, the school site-based management is a new piece for our schools and professional development. And the language around that autonomy, I think, has to become much stronger before we get to pieces such as what you're talking about. Because again, what we're trying to do is formalize a grading procedure across the district so that as parents and students, they know what the expectations are, and it doesn't change necessarily from building to building. So I think that's a future conversation, Ms. Gibbs. I don't believe we're there at this point in time.
Okay. So before you implement it, will you implement it with a standard first and then allow deviations, or implement it with autonomy first? What's been the conversation? Will you say for the first 3 years that we go to this new grading scale, A is 90 and above, or everybody gets to come out and set their own?
Ms.
This
Gibbs,
gets deep around honor roll
Sure.
assembly time, I'm telling you. The parents, when you talk about students who want, to maintain honor roll, or it's a factor for getting into certain summer programs, I would be interested in that conversation.
Ms. Gibbs, President Baker, members of the board. I think when you're discussing honor roll, super honor roll, and so forth, you're more specifically looking at the GPA itself. You're not looking at the determination of A plus, A minus. So when you combine all your grades with those A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus, and so forth, you will end up getting a GPA. And that GPA is currently what determines your ability to be on honor roll.
Yeah, I understand that.
So-
I'm just saying, will there be autonomy and those scales being different, or are we going to have a district set scale based on the new one?
President Baker and members of the board, and Ms. Gibbs, clearly that's a question for the future. What we have before you this evening does not address the honor roll or qualification for that, so we'll certainly look at that next, and hopefully with the board's approval of this, that'll give us a foundation to take that next step.
Okay. Next question is around the valedictorian, salutatorian language, where we talk about the determination and the autonomy of the building level. Was there conversation about maintaining the requirement through the cohort? So if I come in freshman year and this is the standard, does that remain my standard until my 4 years? And if it's going to change, it changes with the next cohort?
President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, that's exactly right. This standard by each high school is determined at the student's freshman year. communicated in the student handbook, and that standard must continue through that cohort's graduation.
Okay, so if they get a new principal says, hey, you know, it's now this, or they want to change, it doesn't affect the students at the cohort level.
That's correct. That is our recommendation, Ms. Gibbs.
Okay, I yield to Board Member Hudson.
Board Member Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. President and Ms. Gibbs. I just have one other question on the repeat courses, the repeat course. Can you explain why you would have it seems to be a disincentive to have, if somebody repeats a course, it's likely because they didn't do well. So why you would list the prior grade or the lower grade on the transcript? And do you find that to be a disincentive?
President Baker, Ms. Hudson, members of the board, due to the fact that the high school transcript is the official record of the student's high school coursework, we truly feel that we are bound to represent that coursework as accurately as possible. And keeping all courses and all grades on that transcript was an important piece for this committee because, again, it is a reflection of their coursework, and in some cases from grades 8 for high school credit courses that they take all the way through high school. But again, if students repeat a course for an improved grade, it is only the better of those 2 grades that are actually calculated into the grade point average. So while it remains on the transcript, the GPA will be calculated with the higher grade.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Mr. President. In that instance, is the advantage here that anyone looking at that transcript can then see a progressive increase or succession in grade that could be tracked? So if I'm a college recruiter and I'm looking at this transcript, I did see that the better grade got recorded, but I also see that this student made an improvement.
President Baker, Mr. Cole, that's exactly correct, that we want to make sure that, again, we represent the student's coursework, and a recruiter and employer can always see the progression of the student's progress through those graduation requirements and see that they did, in fact, improve.
Thank you.
And
Ms.
just as a
Oh,
follow-up,
yes.
oh, I'm sorry, just as a follow-up to that as well, we wanted to balance support and accountability so that there is an accountability for the work that was done, but that the support piece is that if you improve, only that grade point average from that improved course will count. So.
Ms. Gibbs.
Sure, thanks. So I have 2 questions. On page 8, we talk about course additions and that high school and middle school students may be enrolled in a year-long course and they up through the 3rd Friday of the 1st grading period. And then the semester course up until the 2nd Friday. But communication to parents in the term of an interim report normally comes at the 4th week, but they can drop at the 2nd week. How do you resolve the communication? How do you keep kids from dropping the course without their parents figuring out how well they're doing in the course? Because you get your interim report 4 weeks in, but you can drop 2 weeks in. So how do you know in 2 weeks whether or not you can do well in this course?
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Board President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, members of the board. On page 8, we reflect the course additions. So they have up until the timeline established for an additional class to be added to their transcript. That would be, in fact, prior to the interim grades. It is earlier on page 7 that we address the course drops, which is then the 8th week. So that does fall after the interim reporting
Okay.
period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that one. But you can add it up to 2 weeks, but you can drop it after 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have to have your parents sign off on your to drop a class?
To drop a class?
Mhm.
We notify parents if students want to drop a class, and we make sure that they're aware of that, absolutely.
But can they do it? You notifying and you having the approval, it's 2 different things.
Well, it's a conversation, and it's a shared decision-making with a parent about their child as a partner.
So what if you called this parent, you can't get parent X on the phone, Gary doesn't answer the phone. You've called him, you say, hey, your child wants to drop a course, you don't seem to get him on the phone, we're at the deadline. What happens?
I would drive out to the house. I did that yesterday. So we want parents to be our partners, and parents want to be our partners.
Right.
So absolutely, we're going to make every attempt to have that conversation. There are some situations it's harder, but we're going to make every attempt.
Every single attempt.
Yeah, every single opportunity.
And so my next question would be to Board Member Hudson's question. After we have these now, now you're going to get dropped and you're not getting credit for these courses. Are we offering credit recovery, or where do these students make this up? Are they making these courses up in summer school, or are they making them up the next year? Are they making them up through, the VCAP or whatever the new name is? How are they taking these classes again?
So typically, the way that will work is that we have several options, and I think you identified them well. VCAP, which is our Virtual Credit Advancement Program, is available, and I think most high schools offer that during the day as well as after school. So sometimes there's an option for students to actually recover credit during the school day if they're credit deficient. We also have it after school. I know at my school we have it 2 days a week. It's after school. Summer school is also an option for those students that may be credit deficient, they're behind, to be able to recover those credits as well.
Ms. Gibbs, I would add, though, that through the high school experience, high school principals attempt to publish those schedules prior to the first day of the school year, so that any adjustments to the course schedules are taken care of those opening weeks of school. And we make all attempts not to wait to the 8th week, for which then it's too late to add a course. But there's ongoing conversation in those opening weeks of school to make any schedule adjustments at that point in time.
Thank you. I would offer that in your review and in the implementation, that parent approval for dropping gets a stronger kind of a loop, a counterbalance, so that parents aren't caught off guard that your child has no credits, or they've dropped half their schedule because you changed cell phone numbers or nobody can get you, and that they understand that those courses are offered. If we are, I guess, if we're moving to the I and it's incomplete, what work qualifies as the equivalent? Is it whatever the teacher gives them? That was the same work that the other students have gotten? Or is it new and different work that they can assign as an independent study? What is the equivalent work to be made up? And then you talked a bit about how long you have to make it up. If you were gone 15 days, then you have 15 days. What happened if this starts about May 1st?
President Baker, Ms. Gibbs, members of the board, I think it depends on the situation. If it's a first semester issue, the teacher's going to be there the rest of the year. It's probably going to be the work that the teacher originally assigned. If it happens at the end of May, the teacher, hopefully is in Barbados somewhere enjoying the summer, and somebody else may have to come up with an alternate assignment that's equivalent to what was missed, depending on when the illness or medical condition happened.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers. I think that in explaining this, I think the more detail you can give in the option of scenarios, so that the implementation in the new site-based management system can be consistent as much as it can be for us. We have people in circumstances that are always way outside of the norm. But this is meant to build consistency and some sort of standardization. And so I think there's a little more additional thought in some of these, but I do appreciate your work.
Further response, President Baker. Part of what we're doing is incorporating that standard idea. The idea of an incomplete wasn't even a standard idea in the district. A standard grading policy didn't exist prior to the work of this committee. What we're trying to do is bring something. What we had was a paragraph that said teachers will give grades.
Right.
And as we looked at the different districts across the country and even in Central Ohio, they had much stronger grading policies that didn't give as much room for errors to be made. across the district. So I'm thankful for what we're getting. I'm happy to make any kind of accommodations as we move forward. But what we have is stellar in comparison to what we had before.
Right. I think it's a great system, and as long as you can still do extra credit, I think you'll find that parents will be happy. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Cole, please.
Thank you, Dr. Good, and thank you, team, for putting this together. I certainly commend you as well, especially for giving definitive idea to what is a passing or failing grade, bottom line. I think that was something that in years prior that was kind of ambiguous and absent. So thank you again so much for this work.
Other questions from board members? Okay, thank you very much, Director Rett and the team of teachers and principals. Mr. Superintendent?
So yeah, indeed, thanks to Jay Hal Sanchez, Kevin Jackson, Donna LeBeau, Susie Redd, and Todd Walker for that presentation. And they've been working diligently to address an area, an opportunity for improvement in the district. And it's good to have to know the board's will in terms of other areas where we can focus now. I will echo Board Member Gibbs' caution, though, that there are extraordinary circumstances for just about everyone at some point in their K-12 career, and those extraordinary circumstances call for customized responses to support those children. And the goal, of course, is that they master the content that's a part of the adopted course of study that the board adopts, and it's not so focused on how they get there, but that they do get there. And so we do occasionally tailor the assignments to the interests of the students in order that they can demonstrate their mastery in a way that makes sense to them, particularly when they've been absent for a number of days. So I thought that was a really good caution you pointed out, Ms. Gibbs.
Mr. Cole?
Question for the superintendent, and then I won't belabor any further. You would argue then that this is also something that allows us, again, with this mastery concept, it defeats the argument or the case that we are teaching to tests, yes?
Your question again, sir?
The question is that this new mastery type of curriculum, this new pedagogy that we just talked about today, is something that refutes the idea that we are teaching to tests. Would you argue that?
And President Baker, members of the board, and Mr. Cole, yes and no. You know, we've made considerable advances in the industry in terms of how we assess cognition, and those assessments, particularly the new assessments that you've often heard referred to as the PARCC assessments, are more authentic, they're more problem-based, and so students apply an integrated disciplinary approach to solving those problems, which helps us better assess whether they've truly gained that new knowledge and skill or whether they're just regurgitating facts. And so you are absolutely right that we're teaching to mastery, but at the same time, a high-quality assessment will assess mastery. And so one could logically say then you are teaching to the test in those circumstances, provided the test is assessing the mastery of the adopted course of study objectives. So it's a both and it's, you know, it's a 200-year-old discussion in our profession. It's the right one to continue to have, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, have you another presentation for the board?